Welcome to The InEVitable, a podcast by MotorTrend.
Hi there, and welcome to another episode of The InEVitable. This is MotorTrend's vodcast about the future of the car, the future of mobility, the future of technology, the future of the planet. And you will see why in a second. But before we get to our guests, my buddy Ed here has a message for you.
Yes, I do. The InEVitable vodcast is brought to you by the all-electric Nissan Ariya, inspired by the future, designed for the now. And before we introduce our guests right now, let's go to the question because it's a good one.
Ooh, I like
it comes from Instagram. Benjamin Sandness asks us actually. How is it that the Curmudgeon podcast did an episode in the back of a self-driving taxi before you?
Yeah.
Seems way more on brand for your podcast. Okay,
Yeah.
we can just answer that one. Since this thing started, I've been like, we should record this in the back of an EV because EVs are quiet. And we've had Volvo and now Nissan as our sponsor. The challenge really is how.
These three cameras you're looking at. Look, my other podcast, Spike's Car Radio, we were in talks with Waymo to do it, and then we got to like the end where they were like, yeah, we can do this, and they're like, oh, we're gonna have a PR person in the car with you, and like I was like, no, absolutely not, and they're like, oh, it'd be funny.
But were you gonna be all facing forward? That's my problem. Like when cars, it's probably level 5 when you can turn the seats around. I think then we can make a little living room and we could do it.
I mean, we did an episode with Spikes where we got a Rolls Royce, a Ghost, and we recorded the episode in the Ghost. It could be done. Look, we thought of it too. There are no new ideas, right. And especially with that podcast. But anyways,
zing! I love it. Second question, and it's a criticism. Your guests have been broadly optimistic industry executives and engineers. I enjoy getting to know individuals and their stories, but there has also been a fair amount of sameness to the interviews, with perhaps an exception being the recent out-of-spec motoring episodes. Love to hear more stories from tech/businesses that didn't work, or even adjacent media, maybe an interview with the team that did the EV1 documentary. The David Freiberger episode will probably never happen no matter how much beer, bacon, flip-flops you offer him, but a hot rod voice would be rad. Sorry, this is becoming a rant. Benjamin, I love constructive criticism. That was a great question. 2 great questions. To the point, we did have John McGann, editor-in-chief of Hot Rod, on this show in episode 51.
Yep. So
we did get them. But I will tell you, starting with today and the next at least 3 or 4 episodes, very different from what we've had from like an executive level, right, John?
Yeah.
And in fact, introduce our guest.
Well, we're going to get to it in a second. I just want to say, we asked Freiberger, and he literally said, I literally have no interest, which is fair. He was very polite about it. Yes. I think, though, part of it is, like, we're not doing this because it's like, we just really prefer electric cars. Like, when we had our climate scientist friend, and I'm sorry, her name is
Dr. Emily Fisher.
Emily Fisher. It's like the reason we're doing this is like we have a real problem with like releasing more CO2 into the atmosphere is going to hurt humanity's chance to survive and thrive on the planet. And so it's kind of like I don't want to platform like science deniers. Like if you don't believe in the scientific method, I don't want to talk to you. I got nothing to say to you. And so it could just be like, well, if somebody would say, look, I just like gasoline cars so much, I don't care if people die because of them, I'll talk to that person. That'd be an interesting take. But if you're denying the fact that like more CO2 in the atmosphere has really perilous results for human beings, like you're denying science. And we use, so anyways, that's my rant.
Yeah, I'll just take a step back from that and say he's a little fired up. Starting with this episode, we have some very different people than we've ever talked to. And we're going to get right into it with this guy known as ACP. ACP. So it's Johnny's personal friend, also world-renowned, championship-winning rally driver, stunt driver.
Yeah, if you've ever seen Fast and the Furious.
Yes, or Deadpool.
Yeah.
He's worked with Tyler Perry, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Charlize Theron. He's Scott Bakula's stunt double on NCIS New Orleans. He did Top Gear USA. He did the ultimate car build-off, fastest car on Netflix. He has a law degree. He's got 5 degrees. Went to Oxford.
He's really smart. Yeah, he's really, really smart.
Charming gentleman.
Yeah.
Andrew.
Yeah, pretty good looking too.
Andrew Comrie-Picard.
Yeah.
Here to talk about what it's like to drive around the world. ACP, thank you so much for coming in. A lot to talk about, but let's just jump right into it. What's this thing that you're doing? TransGlobal Car?
He did.
Well, is it done?
It's both. So the TransGlobal Car Expedition, and thanks for having me on, by the way.
Yes, of course.
The TransGlobal Car Expedition is the world's first round-the-world expedition through both geographic poles. So we left from New York City on January 9th. We went over the geographic North Pole down to Greenland. Then the team is in Europe right now. We'll be going to Africa soon. And then I will rejoin for Antarctica, for a crossing of Antarctica, coast to coast. Very difficult. Never been done this way before. Up South America, through Central America, back to New York. First time ever done.
Wow.
And what we just completed, to answer the other part of the question, we just went from New York to Greenland on the surface by wheels, which has never been done before, and right to the geographic North Pole. We were there on April 6th. We were about 2 months without seeing anybody at all. We used amphibious, hand-built Russian amphibious vehicles. We used a combination of other vehicles for the Tundra crossing that we innovated a couple years ago, and basically did 10,000 kilometers, 6,200 miles from New York to Greenland.
So back up though about 2 years, because you've been, we're friends, and you've been like disappearing in the winter to go drive around extreme northern Canada, and you were practicing for this, right?
Oh, so that was practice.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
Well, the last couple of years. This year was the real deal.
thing.
But
Yeah, so sections of the route, this has been planned for a long time, but sections of the route had never been done before. So
Right.
nobody had ever driven from a city in northern Canada to the Arctic Ocean. If you're in Tuktoyaktuk, which you may be familiar with, which
No.
was...
I'm sorry. How do you spell that?
yeah, it's really pretty hard. Tuktoyaktuk. It is actually on the ocean, and there used to be an ice road there. Now they've built a road to there, but you can't really drive from there to anywhere else. We went from Yellowknife, which is the northernmost sort of Canadian city.
that I've heard of.
Over the tundra.
That's more northern than Chibougamau?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Okay. All right. What do I know?
And
At this point, you guys are just throwing words out.
yeah, I'm making them
word
up.
salad. These don't exist.
Chibougamau exists.
Yeah, we innovated a route that had never been done before by cars, or the indigenous people have been crossing this terrain for thousands of years.
Sure.
But we went with vehicles, and I used actually a Ford Power Boost hybrid on huge Arctic truck 44-inch tires over the tundra to Bathurst Inlet, which is an inlet on the Arctic Ocean, and then we drove across the Arctic Ocean for thousands of kilometers and made it to the last Canadian community, really, which is called Resolute Bay.
And what degree north of is that?
It's 72 degrees north.
So you still have
Okay. Well, there's still a long way to go to the pole.
Yeah,
long way to go. And in fact, that's where the Top Gear expedition, the famous 2007 Top Gear Toyota Hilux expedition, left from to go to the magnetic North Pole.
Right.
But the magnetic North Pole is relatively easy to tag. The geographic North Pole is really hard work. And it took us 2 months and a team of 12 chipping ice, building ice bridges, floating vehicles.
So once you leave Resolute Bay, which is 72 degrees, and then North Pole is 90 degrees.
Yeah.
So to go these 18 degrees, how many miles is that, or kilometers is that?
Yeah, so a degree is about 110 kilometers.
Okay.
So you're looking at about another
62 miles or something like that. 65 miles.
Yeah. So what are we looking at there?
So it took 2 months to go 1,000 miles.
Yeah. Well, it took 2 months to go up and back to Greenland, which is about 800 kilometers back. So 500.
So 2,000. So 1,000 miles a month.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
So
a good day was 50 kilometers.
A good day is 50 kilometers. I'm looking at the route map, and I see all the red lines, which are overland, and the blue lines, which are water crossings, which I want to get to. By the way, you can see this on transglobalcar.com. Just click around. You'll find it. In this portion above Canada towards the North Pole, where it's all apparently overland, you just said you built ice bridges. Like, what happens? How do you cross water, not an ocean or a sea or like a huge lake? Or what were you doing?
Yeah.
How were you cheating?
No, there was no cheating. So, for people who've done like off-road stuff before, the Rubicon or whatever, like just imagine every possible off-road problem you can get and then put them all into one.
And make it really cold.
Yeah, exactly. We had minus 40 with a 20-mile-an-hour wind, which is really cold.
I've been in minus 40. It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah. Now get out and work on the car.
No, wait. But it didn't get. It didn't get colder than that.
No.
Was it?
No,
Oh.
and I can tell you all about that too. But
Okay.
but to answer your question, Ed,
Global warming, yeah.
to answer your question, Ed, once we left Yellowknife, for a little ways we can be on every year they make an ice road to get to the diamond mines up there. So we had about 400 kilometers on an ice road, which was just a private road, but for the mines. After that, we just turned off of that and went overland. So then we're driving up on snow that's on top of tundra, and about 800 kilometers of that. Using Arctic Trucks as a company in Iceland that's been doing this for 30 years.
Yeah. Sweet Instagram, Arctic Trucks. Just
yeah.
look at them.
Well, I'm involved in Arctic Trucks also, but they've done 300,000 kilometers in Antarctica. Almost every South Pole expedition in some way involves these trucks. And, Prince Harry's Keys to the Pole, the trucks are actually supporting. So Arctic Trucks are experts at this. We built these trucks to cross the tundra, and so nobody had ever done that 2 years ago. To your point, Johnny.
Right.
And so we had to innovate that route, and so it was really fun. I mean, you want to feel like an explorer,
Right.
drive across land where there's never been a vehicle before.
Oh, that's cool.
And you're
Yeah.
like figuring out, okay, can we go down this ridge? Can we go through this valley? How deep is the snow here? How are we going to do this? It was fantastic. And when we finally got to Bathurst Inlet, to the Arctic Ocean, it was, I mean, for me, there's a picture of me with like my fists in the air, and it's like the most genuinely possible success thing. And, I've raced for years and stuff, but like in terms of an achievement, it was massive. And then once we knew that, because Arctic Trucks also did that Top Gear expedition in 2007. We knew that part of the route. We have some Russian experts who've been to the pole before, so we knew almost all the route, except we didn't know that. So, Johnny, to your
Right.
point, a couple of years ago, we went and innovated that part. 3 years ago, another part of the team, I wasn't able to go, went to Antarctica to work on the exit from Marguerite Bay.
Right.
And then last year, we went to do some more testing. I've now spent enough time in the Canadian Arctic that I have an indigenous name up there.
Oh,
yeah.
which is?
It's Ominogoktok, which means man with thin lips. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, it's actually
Very
it's a great
accurate.
honor.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
I don't actually have such thin lips, but it's named after an elder who passed away. It's a great honor. I feel incredible as a Canadian, but
Wow,
it's,
yeah.
I've
Wait,
it's great for me.
Is it good to have thin lips?
Yeah.
Like that? Is it a sign of like attractive potency
Absolutely,
or
it's
something?
of manliness and
Yes,
intelligence.
okay,
So,
Yeah.
but let's get to driving on the Arctic Ocean.
Yeah.
Which sounds weird because it's an ocean, but it's frozen.
These are huge tire vehicles. Arctic Trucks I've seen, but this Yemelya Special
Close.
Mobile
Yemelya.
Yemelya.
Yeah. Yemelya is actually a Russian children's tale about a man who doesn't want to do any work and sits on a magic stove and is able to be transported by the stove wherever he goes with a
Johnny.
magic fish.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. But the point is that these vehicles are magic vehicles that go wherever you want to go. There's only 4 of them. They're hand-built. We have all of them.
Do they? They don't float.
float.
though.
They float.
They do.
Yeah, they don't
they're
have propellers, but they
aluminum.
float.
They're super light.
Weighs less than a Camry.
They float on the tires, or the actual
the water.
the chassis hits the water, and it's like a,
Both. So
Okay.
Again, back to your earlier point of how do you do it? If you're going to drive across the Arctic Ocean, you're going to see every combination of ice and water you can imagine. So a lot of it is frozen solid, which is great. Some of it's extremely rough. So you need to have this 6-wheel drive, as these are, in order to crawl over that stuff.
And you're towing trailers
With
on the
lots
same
of
tires.
fuel and
which
frozen
is crazy.
fish. We were
yeah.
eating whole frozen fish. I took 140 kilograms of frozen fish.
Nice.
But the tires, because they're so large, 51-inch Russian agricultural tires, at very low pressures, and we're talking like 1.5 or 2 psi, they spread the load
So that's
incredibly
basically
thin.
almost atmosphere. I mean, 1.5.
Yeah,
you know.
it's less than the pressure of your foot.
Yeah.
On the ground.
Yeah.
So it really spreads the load. The vehicles are extremely. They look like big blocks, but they're actually sort of built with aerospace thinking. They're all like angle. Aluminum, all drilled out. The steering column weighs 3 pounds. It's actually they're race cars for the Arctic, really, and incredibly well engineered. And so over the ice, the goal is that we reduce ground pressure so much that we don't break through. However, when the ice gets thin enough, and you can watch some gnarly videos we have up there of us going across like 10 centimeter, like 6-inch thick ice, and the ice flexes and waves as we go over.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of that.
Yeah.
It was crazy because you're dealing with, I mean, everything you would deal with in actual off-roading, but instead of like a river crossing where there is a bottom to the river, you're in the ocean.
4,000 meters deep.
Yeah,
10,000 feet deep.
Yeah.
And we're floating. Yeah, and so to go across, so we can't go across like a kilometer open water. So what we have to do is use radar imagery, satellite imagery, in order to find routes where the ice is solid enough for us to drive on. Or if we can't find a way across, we try to find the narrowest so-called why am I blanking? Open leads. So basically, where we're going to have to float them. The longest we can go is about 150 yards or 100 yards, let's say. And what we do is we send two guys over in a tiny little inflatable boat with a hook, an anchor, and they go to the other side with a pulley and an anchor and a climbing rope. And they dig that into the ice on the other side. And then on the first side, we attach one end of the rope to one of the Yemelya, another end of the rope to another Yemelya. We back one up and pull the other one across the water. And then once the one's across, we use that to pull the other ones across. So basically, we effectively winch them or pull them across these open waters. But I can tell you, of all the things I've done racing, X Games, rally, drifting, everything, the first time you drive an amphibious vehicle into the black ocean at 10,000 feet deep, face first, and have the water come over your windshield is an eye-opener.
And so the fear is you don't want to go beyond 150 yards or feet or yards.
It's just the length of the rope, but also there's currents. Part of the problem is that all of the ice in the Arctic is always moving, and so these plates are moving relative to one another. We also have these crazy aluminum ladders.
So real quick, so if you go on TransGlobal Car ACP's Instagram, there's tons of videos of these monster trucks driving on. You see people on Mount Everest with aluminum ladders. I assume it's the same ladder, and they're driving over ladders, which I thought would buckle them.
I did too, honestly. So these vehicles are the brainchild actually of a bunch of Russian climbers that are very, very, very famous in the 70s and 80s. Summited Everest from the wrong side, all the crazy stuff.
From the Chinese side. Yeah.
So they're all
that's hardcore. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're one of the teams that replaced the ladder on the Chinese side. They're that crazy. Very, very good climbers. Yeah. And so they're always thinking lightweighting. All their toothbrushes are sawn in half, all that stuff, right? But they took climbing technology where a lot of crevasses when you're climbing, you have to cross on an aluminum ladder. Mm-hmm. So they took that same thing and scaled it up to vehicle size. Okay. So the aluminum ladders are actually just aluminum tube, about 2-inch long rails with about 2-inch diameter rails with about 1-inch diameter crossbars lashed together with climbing rope. But you put two of those down, and you can drive a 3,600-pound vehicle on a couple of trailers across a crack in the ice. Let's say, that's a few meters, or a meter long, or a meter and a half long. But the point is, as you probably saw in the videos, the ladder actually bends and buckles, but then it springs back.
It's
good
aluminum.
Alloy. But it's a good alloy. And then eventually you're like, it bent a little bit, so you flip them over and run them on the other side. But when you're doing that, you're like, well, it's 10,000 feet deep over this little crack. And I fell in a couple of times. Everybody falls in once or twice because you're out there chipping the ice. You're
you mean you fell in, you're standing
on the
there
ocean.
And you fell in?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. Sometimes because there's very slushy. So saltwater ice is it's kind of deceptive, and it can be, where it looks like there's slush, it can actually just be a hole. So you have to, we carry an ice pick in front of us and just keep picking.
Okay, yeah, I saw a lot of that. Yeah.
Okay. And then suddenly the ice, it goes through, and you're like, oh, wait, can't walk there. But everybody puts a foot wrong or whatever. We don't stray very far from each other.
And you're tied off to something.
No. But if you start to go in, if you hold the ice pick across you can sort of stop from going further, or it's fairly buoyant. It's just a pain in the butt.
It's salty. You float. Yeah.
Salty and cold, high density.
Yeah, but then of course it's minus 40 and your legs are all.
I was going to say, how horrible is it to fall into the ocean at minus 40?
Yeah, I mean, you get out real quick because you're super motivated. In fact, once I fell in,
you wearing like a suit?
No, like very high tech ski.
The hell are you
clothes.
guys? Come on, no, you're getting in the water. You're not wearing like one of those.
No, because we're exceptionally tough at it. No, it's just
we're Canadian.
Well, they also have to go to the bathroom at some point.
The trap door.
Well, that's a whole other thing with polar bears, because we do have polar bears, and it is very cold, and you learn to go to the bathroom really fast.
Yeah, I've heard this. I was once offered the chance to drive across the South Antarctica, and I was like, well, how do you do that? And they told me, I was like, nope, not going.
Well, I wanted you to come on this, but it's you got to go to the bathroom fast. You learn some technique. You also learn to like frozen fish. We just take we just cut sections of frozen fish and either shave them off and eat it raw, or we sometimes broil it, or we have lots of powdered climbing food. It's 2 months of bad eating.
I'm into it.
How was the 2 months with the same dudes and dudes only for
thin
2
lips.
months?
Tell us all about it.
Easy, tiger. It was great. It was a real mishmash of cultures. We had Russians, Icelandics, Ukrainians, Canadians, and Americans. We have a bit of everybody. Yeah. And so it's a little like any what you imagine an expedition should be like, where national things don't matter,
right?
And you're all just unified behind the project. And in fact, it's something I've been doing a lot of thinking about, and I'm going to try to write something about how with mission criticality, where you're all united by the same end, the same purpose. It takes away all your sort of personal vendettas or whatever, and you're all just united to do the same thing, like in the military, like in racing teams.
In the International Space Station. I think there's probably more akin to what you're doing with that than anything else. Funny
you should mention that. One of our extended team is an Italian astronaut who spent 300 days on the space station. So we took his advice on how to work as a group. And his best advice was it's very interesting. I'm a scientist, but really I'm a very good toilet technician, because you have to fix the toilet a lot.
So okay, this is great. I want to just go back to this because I'm fascinated. The biggest fear in doing these crossings. The car floats, but it's not like a sub, right? If it goes over at some angle, it's going to start sinking.
Yeah, and you put your finger on one thing. Once you get a certain amount of pitch angle, now it could go over and it could swamp. It won't sink quickly, and it's funny. The Russian creator of these things, he's like a 70-year-old climber who can still do like one-arm pull-ups. I said to him, like, what if we do take on water? What if the door somehow gets perforated or something? And he's like, oh, well, it will be, you have probably 45 seconds, 1 minute. There's porthole in the roof.
I was going to ask.
Get bag ready. So I would always have like a bug out bag that basically had my, like essential passport and stuff to jump out the roof.
It's funny when you hang out with Russians, you realize like how much tougher than everybody they
hardcore.
Like I have a friend and like talking about her different childhoods, and she's telling me when her grandma died, like her parents had to leave to go tell the rest of the family. So she spent 3 days with the corpse, just babysitting the corpse. She had to keep packing ice on it because it was hot. I'm like, what? How old? 7. And like just matter of fact about it. Like we're very soft.
Yeah, it's that plus I think expedition mentality. Climbers, they're like, we will not be able to get body off mountain.
Right.
It's
right.
like,
Yeah, we'll visit them next year.
Yeah. So I appreciate it.
Now, I want to bring something up that might be a little touchy, but at some point during this expedition, you texted me, and if I'm paraphrasing here, but it was like basically like, man, this is really hard. I miss my wife. I really miss my kids. I don't know if I should go through with this. What do you think? And I said, and again, I was like, I wrote you back real fast, and I was like, all right, I think like this is something, if you do it, no one can ever take it away from you. Your wife's probably thrilled you're out of the house. Kids are resilient. You got to do it. And then I hit send, and I turned to my wife, and I'm like, who knows you a little bit. And I go, oh my God, was this good advice or bad advice? Like maybe I just ruined his marriage or helped,
I was going to say, why did you text Jonny?
And then my wife goes, that's the advice he needs. We have another friend. She goes, if it was so-and-so, like, absolutely not. You told him to get home on a plane now, but like, I think they're going to be okay. So
how old are your kids?
8 and 10 girls.
Okay.
They're great, and they're little stunt girls themselves. They try to scare us every day, and so they're doing to me what I did to my parents.
But was it good advice?
It was great advice,
Cool.
But I'll tell you the moment I was at, and I remember it vividly because we were actually in a town called Cambridge Bay, which is an indigenous community, the one back from Resolute, almost the point of no return, not quite, but close. And so you'll appreciate this. It's middle-age problems, right?
Yeah.
Like I have a lifetime of taking big risks with cars, right? Like movie stunts. Rally racing, X Games, all that stuff, right? And it's like I'm kind of like probably some of that I did because I had something to prove, right? Let's just guess,
sure,
like a lot of racers do, right?
Sure.
And I'm kind of past that.
Right.
I'd love to prove myself, but it's not like I need to. I don't need another trophy. So I was there thinking, oh God, I'm going to go for 3 months, to a place that, and there's not a small amount of risk. Right.
Yeah.
And I've got a business here in Los Angeles. I got my tire company. I got my family. I got movie things to do. That's where the income comes from. And I started asking if it was responsible. It was more of a midlife. I haven't really had a midlife crisis, but it was more big midlife questions.
Oh,
like,
this is clearly a midlife crisis.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
This is my therapy.
But you're kind of sitting in an aluminum can for 2 months.
Yeah. Look, it wasn't going to be pleasant, and one way or the other. It was going to be hard, but that's
Yeah.
okay. I expect hard.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if it was the intelligent choice. But I think that ultimately, in the great span of time, and when you start to look at things. This also speaks to what I'm talking about I want to prepare something or write something about what it means for people to take on challenges and to stretch a little too far. And I will include our text in that or our that discussion because I am glad that I did it. I did learn from it. It was, fantastic team building. I think there are lessons to take away from that. And it is a great sense of achievement that I, unlike, X Games or whatever, when we were all trumpeting it, this is like something I can more quietly keep to myself, except for today. But it's difficult in the moment when you're staring down something like, should I start this new business? Should I go on this expedition?
Right.
Should I do this crazy thing? And even the number of times I've been on a start line or the beginning of a movie stunt where you just have to say, hey, I'm the guy. I'm going to screw up my courage, and here we go. I learned a lot from Travis Pastrana there too. But you just got to go.
Right.
But this one, because it was so long and I have so many responsibilities, it was hard.
So was that exchange during or right at the beginning, right before you were evaluating
the beginning?
Well, no, it was after we'd gone from New York to basically the high Arctic, and then it was at the point where, like, if I don't fly out now, I have to charter a small aircraft to pluck me off somewhere. Like that's
And then let's talk about the scientific purpose for the journey. Because, like, yeah, it's cool to just go drive around, but you actually guys were trying to do a couple things.
Yeah. Thanks.
And one of them ties in with our show, but the other one.
What's the point of the
But there was two. There was the gamma ray experiment, which I don't understand, and then there was like, do we have any ice left?
Yeah. So we have actually 5 scientific projects that we are carrying along, and a couple of them, the major ones that we did in the Arctic. One is an ice thickness survey. We pulled behind us, and you can see it on some of the pictures, this crazy electromagnetic resonance device, which basically penetrates the surface of the ice down to the salt water and bounces back. So it gives us a reading of the thickness of the ice constantly. You would think we'd have that in front of the vehicles, but in fact, it's being pulled behind one of the vehicles. Sure. But we're constantly logging that data. We use it ourselves to see, like, ooh, how thick is the ice? And what's going to happen next? But also that data is being constantly uploaded via Starlink, which I can talk about in a second, to an institute in Germany and a scientist that we work with there and had worked with for years, for really the first continuous survey of that data across the pole. Because if you wanted to get that data previously, you'd either fly a plane in and try to land on skis somewhere where it's flat enough and safe enough, and then drill the ice and take surveys. Or some guys with skiing on sleds have gone a certain distance, but you have to have a power source, you got to carry the equipment, all that. We, with vehicles, with generators or alternators, were able to like power the stuff the whole way, and have the constant data. So that data is actually being compiled, and I've seen some of the data feedback now in Germany, and it's fantastic because we now have a survey of the thickness of the ice across the pole, and they can compare to data they have from previous years, which is fantastic. There's another important thing, not just to talk about how thick the ice is, but satellite and radar imagery, which we used extensively in order to find the route, is pretty good at showing the extent of ice cover, but it's very poor at showing thickness.
Sure.
Right? So it can show roughness, which is very important because, as you may have seen from the videos, like we are also going across these huge towers of ice and breaking them down.
That was wild. I mean, it does look like you're like rock climbing on ice.
100%.
It was crazy.
Oh, yeah. And it's like I was physically shattered. I lost a bunch of weight. It was very hard physical work outdoors. But anyway, that's an aside.
Yeah.
The point is that there are estimates of ice thickness from the satellite and radar imagery, but the accuracy is not very good and it's not very well known. By having this data from on the ground, they can triangulate the data on those days from the satellite and radar images to the actual ground truth.
So they can know what
ground
truthing. They can know what they're looking at.
Right.
In other words,
we can refine how the satellites and radar imagery speaks going forward. So it's a really great service. So we're very proud of that.
Good.
Then the next one is it was a crazy hookup, but we got connected with CERN, the particle accelerator in Switzerland, and we went over there and then got involved with a project called Cosmic Pi, which is so basically the Earth is being constantly barraged by not only UV, which you're probably familiar with, but also from energy released from dark matter in the universe. 95% of the universe is unknown material. It's releasing a massive amount of energy. We're being barraged even right now as we sit here in the studio with muons, right, which are affecting. So cosmic rays come, hit the atmosphere, break into smaller particles or break aspects of the atmosphere into smaller particles, and they hit you right now. Like we're literally being sprayed with
constantly your whole life forever. Yeah.
Tinfoil hat time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, actually, I was at CERN at this particle.
Did you talk about chemtrails at CERN?
Yeah, they're explaining all this to me, and I'm starting to look up, and they're like, "Oh yeah, right now, it's happening right now." So, like in Antarctica and in Chicago and in Geneva and so on, there are very large, what are called scintillators, which collect data on these muons hitting this big plate. However, they were able to miniaturize this into a couple of Pelican cases for us, actually with Ukrainian-built scintillators. And actually a public source like a Raspberry Pi type board on it. And that allowed us to constantly survey the data going across the pole of the number of muons hitting on what angles, what speeds, all the way. That data has never been collected north of 82 degrees north. Svalbard, which is, you may know, an island.
Norway.
Yeah, it's a cool place. We went there too. Yeah.
You went to Svalbard?
Yeah.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Cool.
It's a cool.
I'd love to go. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well,
So if I can interrupt, the thesis here is great. The fact that you're doing something that's never been done before, which is essentially dragging some trucks and some sleds over the North Pole, then you just kind of shop this around and say, hey, if we have this thing, what would you want to stick on it? You can stick it on the truck. You can stick it on the sled.
It's like experiments in space, right?
Right. Okay.
We'll take them up. Yeah. But wasn't there some kind of bet? Like somebody had, like in 1902, they figured out the number of gamma rays hitting. Didn't I read something about that? And you guys were settling a bet or something?
Our science team was posting stuff about that. I don't know all that. I'm actually the science liaison officer because I have a bit of a science background, like just enough to talk to the scientists.
Right. He's also a lawyer. But anyways,
I want to talk about it. You have 5 degrees, but that's later.
So there is a long history of these things because like special relativity, it was something that was like imagined to exist,
right?
And then it was proven to exist.
You needed Michelson and Morley to prove it,
exactly. So it for me, it's very interesting.
But you did we'll have to do this. But there was like some great debate that your team settled, right?
Well, No, we haven't settled any debates, but we've collected data that's never been collected before, and they're actually chewing on the data right now. In fact, it was very stressful. I had the 3 micro SD cards that had all the data. So we were constantly uploading by Starlink, which again I'll talk about in a second. But I'm in possession of the 3 cards, and I had to make images of them and send them. But I was thinking, like, this is the only data that's ever been collected north of 82.
But Starlink, I remember because we did spend quite a bit of time communicating, and you were constantly going off about how much you love Starlink.
Well, yes and no. So 2 years ago when we went and did the pre-expedition, the best technology we had was like Iridium or like older satellite technologies, where you could like either spend $1 billion, thousands of dollars, and send a couple of pictures, or I had an InReach, like a explorer's hiker's text machine, right? Which is on Iridium, which you can send like a 142 character text, which you click out in the olden days of texting. Like,
Yeah.
So then last year I outfitted 2 of our vehicles with Starlink high performance because we, all the videos that you saw, like we couldn't do that at all, right?
Right.
So we tried it last year and it seemed to work pretty well, and so we had it full blown this year. There's a couple of funny things there. One, I was on like the Continental plan, or I paid for the really good Continental plan, and then eventually they shut us down saying you're in a boat. I'm like, no, I'm not in a boat. I'm in a, and so we had to pay for like the $1,000 marine plan or whatever. So we have boats.
How much does Starlink cost? What's the setup cost?
It's amazing. So it is actually amazing. So the normal, and this is, by the way, revolutionized communications in the Arctic.
Sure.
Because now communities that had very expensive or very little communication, now there's a Starlink on everybody's house. Right. Which is, it's good and bad. So the normal sort of smaller one, I think the cost of admission is like $750 for the disc, and then I think the base plan is $150 a month, and it is lightning fast and can support a lot of devices. We bought the larger, like $2,500 double-sized high-performance disc, which doesn't have to be on an articulated stand. The small one's motorized actually and moves around. Anyway, the larger one is capable of being fixed. Although I down at Baja 1000 this year, all the Baja 1000 chase crews have discovered this, and all the trucks are festooned with these smaller devices that they've hot rodded and taken off the flexible base, and they've changed it all up. Anyway, it's a great look for safety. It's fantastic. I wanted it for safety because we could keep in touch with our medical team, our emergency extraction team,
But also talk to the kids, right?
100%.
Yeah.
They got bored of talking to me.
Yeah. See?
Yeah. But also, I did a live stream from the North Pole.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's the first live stream that's ever been done from the North Pole.
I guarantee it. Yeah.
And we were able to send like great videos of the flexing ice and all this stuff, and we were able to constantly upload the data from both the ice thickness measurement and from.
So you didn't have to worry about like, oops, I just fell in the ocean
exactly
holding an SD
card.
Well,
the problem is, the only problem there is that the cosmic muon collectors didn't constantly work through the Starlink, so there are missing chunks that are only on those cards. But but generally, it was incredible. So the problem is, however, 2 years ago when we did this, I felt like we were on Mars. Right? Like I was away from the world. Yeah. And I've got, as I say, I got a business, I got a family, I got other things, but it was like suddenly you were like, you could zoom way out. And you're like, oh, now it felt, I was playing like Coldplay's, like suddenly you're like, mystically away from everything.
Sure.
Right? Whereas now it's like, I'm like, well, what's going on with the tire company? Or like, what's, and it's, you can't escape anymore.
Looking for the best off-road trails? OnX Off-Road has you covered. With over 750,000 miles of trails and comprehensive offline maps, you can explore without worrying about cell service. Easily find trails for 4x4s, ATVs, dirt bikes, and more. Our app provides detailed trail info, including difficulty ratings and open/closed dates. OnX Off-Road also helps you navigate public and private land boundaries, ensuring you stay legal. Try OnX Off-Road free for 7 days and discover why it's the go-to app for off-roaders. Download now. Man, I got tons of questions.
We haven't even talked about you're a stunt guy for the Fast and the Furious, huh?
You said 5. You said 5 experiments. We've covered ice thickness. We've covered gamma rays.
There's a couple of others. One we haven't really leaned into yet, although we're doing it right now in Europe, a light pollution survey. Right. So another interesting thing is that, and so we got involved with the Citizen Science Project, which is basically based out of Geneva, also out of CERN's facilities, where they're trying to do a amalgamation of citizen collected science. So you can use your smartphones, for example. You can actually convert your smartphone camera. You have to cover it up and so on, but you can convert that into a very small muon detector for example. So our third experiment is to give everybody their own little scintillator. And in fact, I'd love to promote that because we're right now in Africa. We've actually got a team of students in Africa who have started collecting cosmic ray data in Africa.
Wow.
Using very basic cell phones, which is actually really changing the landscape of the data that's being collected on it. It's really, really cool.
Where do you find?
You can go to transglobalcar.com. There should be a link there to the Cosmic Pi citizen science section. Look at our citizen science.
Okay.
Another citizen science thing that we're doing, and that we're doing a survey on with slightly different equipment, is light pollution. So again, satellites are pretty good at showing which parts of the globe are now very light polluted, very hot. You know, New York City's, perhaps London's, or whatever.
Yeah.
But in fact, that data is not very good because it's from above. So a lot of things, billboard lights, street lights, and so on, actually point down.
Right.
And depending on how what the infrastructure of a country is like, that means that some countries look like they're hotter than they really are, or some that look like cooler than they really are in terms of light pollution. And it has an effect on circadian rhythms and and sleep patterns and all this sort of stuff, which is fairly interesting. So we're doing I don't know if it's the world's first, but a really comprehensive survey of light pollution using data collection throughout our route, because we're not only crossing. It's funny, when we did the launch of the Explorers Club in New York, we're like, we talked about the Arctic and all the difficulties, the Antarctic and all the difficulties. And there was a guy from the overland community there, and he said, just so you know, you're doing 5 independent expeditions on continents that we all consider to be very big expeditions also.
Right.
Oh,
right.
yeah, I hadn't really thought of that.
Right.
So because we're crossing all of
you're
Europe.
you're part of the cold team.
Right. All of Europe, all of Africa, all of South America, Central America, we're able to collect data all the way along there too.
Right. Wow.
So then,
That's 3 and 4. 5th one I can't talk about right now, but
Okay.
we'll talk.
Oh.
so then let's circle back. It's like, what's the key message point about ice thickness?
Yeah.
This is and if you
or let me-
don't believe in climate change, this is the part where you cover your ears.
Also,
listeners.
let me ask you this: could you do this in 5 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the
And would
answer-
it have been easier 5 years ago?
Yeah, it would have been. The answer is that I first started pitching a pole-to-pole expedition about 12 or 14 years ago to car manufacturers and to Discovery and Netflix, who I worked with, and so on. We never quite got over the line, and then this one, I got together with another person who was working on it, and this is how it all worked out. The point is, 12, 14 years ago, it looked good. Like, I thought we were going to be able to take non-amphibious vehicles to the North Pole, and then I worked closely with Arctic Trucks. We figured out the route. It looked like it was going to be okay. Now, we could not have done it without amphibious vehicles now. And looking at the ice imagery from this year versus 5 years ago, 10 years ago, for sure, the coverage is less. That in terms of the millions of square meters under cover, right? And it's melting earlier. It's changing migration patterns. It's changing hunting patterns for indigenous people. It's absolutely, and if you talk, anecdotally to indigenous people in the North, Inuit, they'll, of course, they know it's changed. They know that it's melting earlier. That it's melting further back. It's huge, and they're having it's weirder weather patterns too. It's also colder sometimes. There's no doubt that there's a change. Now, how much of that's affected by our activity or not? That's for scientists smarter than, well, I'm not even a scientist, but for people smarter than me. But it's different. It is 100% different.
And then it looks like it's going to keep, again, could you do it in 5 years?
Yeah, well,
in a submarine.
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely every year we can see it. I mean, there's a couple of bumps in the graph, but it's definitely getting thinner and smaller every year. The biggest challenge to doing it in 5 years actually is that logistic support may be gone. It's just so we had to do 4 airdrops of fuel, and I got to coordinate
I watched these. These are cool.
This is the other question I had. Like, how the hell are you? These things, 6-wheeled vehicles with 51-inch tires clearly get really good fuel economy.
Actually,
right?
better than you think,
because they don't weigh anything.
They don't weigh anything.
And you're not
really
going
slow.
fast.
And you have these big floaty tires, and the engine is a 2.2 liter Toyota diesel out of Europe, out of a Toyota pickup truck.
So Hilux power.
Yeah, and it's basically going at 1,200 RPM all the time.
Oh,
Right.
So you're just like
Constant.
blah, 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 blah,
Right.
blah, ticking along. It's actually
But
pretty
it does
good.
burn a lot of diesel eventually.
Yeah, and also we're going over ice ridges as big as buildings and breaking them down and climbing around 6-wheel drive. For sure, we use fuel. So the first fuel, we got some fuel put in at a if you want to look up some very cool pictures, there's an abandoned radio station, which was code, or weather station, which was code for Russian monitoring stations in the high Arctic, called Isaacson, and it's straight out of a movie. It's like the lounge chairs are still there, but they're drifted over, and there's a cigarette stand still there, an ashtray stand still there. It looks like the science team stood up in 1956 and walked away, and snowdrifts came in. It's insanity.
Right. Probably 91, but yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I think it was it was around then. it's incredibly beautiful. It's haunting. It's like if you want to explain, there's a crashed C-47.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah,
I
there's
saw that.
a crashed airplane nearby. It's unbelievable images. Anyway, we got a light plane to fly in 6 barrels of fuel there that met us there ahead of time, and then from there to the North Pole, there was no way for anything to land. So we had fuel bladders built in Australia with parachutes, 6 of them, 200 liters each, that we had pushed out of a DC-3, a beautiful plane. Flew in low. Well, it flew in 1,000 feet, dropped these barrels to us. And again, I was like, on Starlink, I was like talking to them and coordinating our coordinates. So like, okay, come in, you'll see us. And then we see them and they drop the fuel. And then they like pushed out 2 spare tires and a bunch of frozen fish, which was hilarious. And then we picked it all up.
And it's all on Instagram. If you go to TransGlobal Car or ACP's Instagram, you can watch this drop happening. It's super cool.
ACP Racing 20.
That's the Instagram.
20. ACP Racing 20.
And on Facebook, Andrew Comrie-Picard. That's actually, I do more on Facebook because I'm old.
Facebook, Andrew Comrie-Picard.
Yep.
Yeah, but also TransGlobal is
TransGlobal Car. Yeah, thanks on both channels.
But it's killer watching that plane come in. I mean, super low and just pushing out.
I was hoping it would be like a Tupolev or like a Russian.
Well, I got more of that too.
Okay.
So, but what's cool for me is that like, and it's funny thinking about it from sitting here in Los Angeles. Like when you're up there in the Arctic, it seems normal. It seems normal to see that there's a guy like roped into a plane pushing a tire out to you. You just go get the tire, right? But I didn't think about the fact that it's a beautiful plane pushing out a ridiculous tire, bounces on the tundra, and we just go over and get it.
Right.
No chute for the tire? Just,
no.
Who cares?
It's rubber.
That's awesome.
Yeah. No shoot for the fish either. We had to pick up individual bits of fish all over the place.
Before the polar bears did.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's that too. But then on the pole actually, so this goes back to the point about logistics. For the history, maybe you can look it up on Wikipedia, but for the last 15 years or so, there's been a station built every season near the North Pole called Barneo. It was initiated by the Russians, purchased by the Swedes. It's out of Svalbard. It bases out of Svalbard. And every year they go build it. They have to go and airdrop guys parachute in, find a place on the ice, it's going to be okay. They drop in some equipment. They start to prepare a runway. Then they drop in like graders and stuff, and they build a runway where planes can land. And then people who are going to like ultra marathon near the pole or ski to the pole or whatever, this is their place, right? It's expensive to go. We know the people who organize it. We were able to say, hey, we need X amount of fuel, 14 small barrels of fuel. We need to bring in extra food, dried food and stuff. And they said, great, we'll bring it up and we'll pop it over to you on the pole with a Russian Mi-8 helicopter, which is so cool.
Oh,
correct.
Is that like the Rambo 3 helicopter? The big.
No. It's not a Hind. It's not the one.
It's got the glass bubble front.
Okay.
It's super cool.
Yeah. Okay.
You can see the video.
Yeah.
So
missed that one.
So they'd built the station this year. So it hadn't been built for the last 4 years. First because of COVID, and then because of the Russian conflict with the Ukraine. And then this year they went to build it again, and they had clients and everything ready. And they were building it, runway cracked in the middle. This is the problem you have in the Arctic. You build a runway, then it cracks.
Yeah.
And then they built it again, and then it cracked again. And they flew our fuel over to us. And incidentally, they got on our Starlink then, all these pilots. Oh my gosh, because they'd been 2 months already in the north and had no contact with their families because they didn't have Starlink. Anyway, so we got the fuel, and then they flew back to this Barneo station about 100 kilometers away. And then the runway cracked again, and they gave up for the year. And it's possible that it's never going to happen again there, this station.
Because of shrinking ice.
Yeah, because of a lot of things, political conflicts, the difficulty of
but
building
the
a station.
the cracking of the runway seems to be the what shut it down.
100%. So the point is that it hasn't been there for the last 4 years. I don't think there's been anybody to the North Pole for at least the last 4 years, and I don't see how anybody could ever do what we did again without fuel coming from there. You could drag more fuel, but it's very hard.
That's hard. Yeah.
Let me just clarify. When you did this North Pole crossing, it was just the Yemelya trucks. So four of them.
Yeah. So it's the whole TransGlobal Expedition is sort of horses for courses. We're using Ford Expeditions for the land, the continental land masses. Then in the high Arctic, we're using Arctic trucks to cross the tundra and the beginning of the ocean. And then when we're going to have ocean cracks, cracks in the water, we used the Russian amphibious vehicles. Then right now we're back in expeditions going down through Europe and Africa, and then we'll switch back to Arctic trucks to cross Antarctica.
Why Fords?
Well, it's a great question. I'm happy about it because I'm a longtime Ford guy. I drove for Ford Racing at the end of my racing career. But also, Arctic trucks used to use Toyota Hiluxes because they're great. they're all around the world in every military zone. They're incredibly tough, right?
but
You
they're
know this.
small.
Parts availability.
But they're small.
Small.
And because Ford went to aluminum bodies and it's a fairly big truck, we started working with first F-150s and then F-350s because they're large and relatively light.
Yeah,
And you need to put a lot of stuff and people in them.
Yeah.
So we built 6x6s. Now we build them in Wyoming, actually, for Arctic trucks, North America. And we're building 6x6s. We've sold actually a lot of them to the Canadian High Arctic road builders and so on to use as work trucks, but on 44-inch Nokian flotation tires.
Yeah, last time I was in Iceland, I saw a bunch of, it was the front end of an F-450 with the back end of an Excursion.
Sure.
And that was like a bus. That's like basically a public bus. And it was like the coolest thing.
It makes sense. It makes sense as an expedition vehicle if you're just in North America, right? But then that's kind of the beauty of the Hilux, right? It wasn't just that it's all that Toyota reliability stuff, but it's just the parts availability, right? If you broke down, you just roll into any shop. But but what are you going to do with a 350 you're in South America or something there?
Yeah, well, in South America, we're using Expeditions in our Power Boost
Expeditions.
F-150. But in Antarctica, we have Arctic Trucks has a certain number of vehicles in Antarctica permanently, and most of them are Hiluxes. We're going to put these the F-350s there this year.
Interesting.
We've developed the systems to be able to support them ourselves. Like any expedition, you have to be self-supporting.
And in modern trucks, luckily, not much breaks. I mean, the reliability has improved in the last 20
Or
years.
when it does, you're toast because it's all
You put your-
electronic.
Yeah, but you'd have a spare set of everything, pistons and rods and valves and cams and whatever you need, right?
You're both right. The mechanical reliability is incredible. The electronic and systems reliability is a lot more questionable. So, the most important thing that we have is a computer to be able to diagnose and
Right.
fix. And we have every sensor, every cam sensor, every crank sensor, every temperature
and
sensor.
you have a mechanic that can analyze it,
Old rally
fix it.
mechanics. My old rally guys.
yeah, nice.
I called them a couple of years ago and said, "Hey, what are you guys? Two brothers, Pascal and Marcel. What are you guys doing?" And now they're on the expedition.
Huh.
Oh,
So
that's
then,
cool.
okay, the Yemelyas are six-wheel. They look really big. What's in? Are you sleeping in them? What's inside?
Yeah.
What's inside?
Think of it like a big Volkswagen Westphalia.
Okay.
Yeah, you sleep in the back. There's a little table that folds down. We use camp stoves inside.
And you were primarily a driver.
Yeah, I'm kind of the face of it, the talking guy, because I have
Clearly.
experience with that. And
And what
but
a
yeah,
face!
driver.
What a face! I'm
Yeah,
looking at
thanks.
it now. Yes.
Right.
Scott Bakula's a stunt double.
Yeah, my gosh, you've really done your
Wow.
research. Oh, jeez. Yeah, it's funny because Scott is like half my size, or I'm twice his size. But yeah, I did a lot of driving. I drove about half the time in our vehicle.
And they're center steer.
Yeah,
Super cool.
Center steer, flat steering wheel, like a bus seat. It's not the most comfortable way to roll.
Suspended bus seat.
No, hard
Save
plastic.
weight. You gotta save
for
weight.
less weight. The seat
okay.
weighs 3 pounds.
And then, but like all kinds of lockers and explain that because that was a fun video to watch.
Well, so, again, this very innovative designer, climber from Russia, came up with this. The engine is inline mounted in the center of the vehicle for weight distribution to be low, and it's got a Toyota transmission on it. But that connects to Mitsubishi Pajero differentials with electronic lockers, front and rear, and then it doesn't actually have a locker in the center, but basically couplers that couple the front and rear axles together. So you have to decide strategically the best way for fuel economy and for putting less stress on the driveline, because you have a huge tire that can put incredible torque on the axle, is to run with everything open. But then you get to a feature, an ice ridge or something that you have to get over, and you have to decide how much to lock. And the very last thing you do is lock across the axles, because the chances of breaking an axle or something get exponentially great. And we really need the front axle to be locked when we climb out of the water up onto the ice, because you
Right.
need both of those front tires to move simultaneously to pull you up.
And how many spare axles did you bring?
We actually I had the drive shaft shop in the U.S. build some new ones for us. We brought, I don't know, 6 or 8. We broke 2, but the ones we broke were old, repaired ones.
Oh, right, okay.
Again, it's like expedition stuff.
Where would you break them? At the mounting point?
Yeah, we actually the ones
Shear them?
that we broke were. It's so you know how axles, you know how metal fatigue can work. Like as you twist something, there's always like a stress riser point, and then it penetrates through the thing spirally usually, right? The 2 axles we broke actually had previously been broken and repaired with sleeves. So in fact, we did really well. We drove very carefully.
Yeah. And what's the top speed of a Yemelya? Wide open.
Yeah, I think they'll go 40 kilometers an hour. There are 5 gears.
So that's,
the transmission's
that's like
upside down.
28 miles an hour.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So like the transmission, the shift pattern's inverted. So first is like away and down, and you have to, once you do it for a month, you remember
it's like driving an old car.
Yeah, exactly. But it
and you do have a Model T. We should let everyone know. 1919, I believe.
yeah, right. My 1919 Model T. I would have brought it today. It would have taken taken me 3 days to get here. But they don't move fast. You're like a turtle. You just keep moving. Just keep moving.
And the engine center mounted is serviceable from inside the truck, right? That's a highlight of Russian vehicles in the cold. So you don't, if you need to fix it,
the Bahuka van,
Yeah,
you can fix it
the
from
US,
inside. Yeah.
Well, there's two aspects to that, actually. So what there is in the middle of your living space is just like this carpet-covered mound, right, under which is the engine. Yep. But when you need to service it, at the end of the day, you just lift it up and service it. That's great. But it also warms the interior, right? And it's genius. The floors are built out of like sections of particle board, effectively, with insulation on the bottom side. And what it means is because you're getting in and out, and unfortunately, it's like, it's a 3.5 foot or 4 foot drop, so my knees took a punishing over the course of 3 months. But you jump in and out of the vehicle, you climb in on ropes, and you jump out onto the ground. But you always trade in a bunch of snow. So that snow, actually, because of the heat from the engine, melts down through these particle boards, floorboards, collects in the bottom, then use a bilge pump to just pump it out sometimes.
Oh, wow. So the guy who designed it, what's his name? Shout out to
Vasily Elagin.
So Vasily, has he designed a vehicle before?
No, because he probably should.
Dude, it's because I was like mesmerized every time you post about these vehicles, like sophisticated thinking. Yeah. And this is just from climbing a lot, or he's just a super genius.
He is an extremely bright guy and a material scientist. However, I'll give it away. He also in the mid '80s was on a Paris-Dakar team.
Okay.
So he knows his stuff.
How do these compare versus the Sherp?
Yeah, same philosophy, and there are a lot of Russians are into this stuff, like because they have a lot of like muskeg.
They don't have a lot of actually. If you've been to Russia, their roads are horrid.
Yeah, I mean, you need an amphibious vehicle to go anywhere. Yeah. It is like a Sherp, but larger and more reliable. And nothing against Sherps, but those are like fun little
toys.
They're
short range
water
things.
skis,
jet
skis.
Right. We have like the equivalent of a yacht.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Political question. I've been reading articles about how the North Pole is being politicized, militarized. Did you see any of that? Did you see like bases? Did you see Russian bases?
Did you
Chinese
see another
bases?
living thing?
Yeah. So
polar bears with lasers on their heads.
Oh, that's what that was. Generally, no. Okay. However, I'm a Canadian, and I feel strongly about northern sovereignty for Canada. And I'm with a bunch of Russians and Icelandics who also have interests in the north, and an American, right? And we all have our nations have those interests in the north. What makes me happy is it's a bit like, I always think of the English patient, if you're as nerdy as I am. It's like, people are from all around the world, but you're on one expedition. It doesn't matter where you're from, right? You're all just unified by the purpose. And never in our party did anything about northern sovereignty come up. Okay. Plenty of talk about politics came up. But however, that said, there's no doubt that the Arctic is getting politicized both for military defense, but also for resource and transportation possibilities. The Northwest Passage, the whole exploration of the Northwest Passage, and I got a couple of presents for you that speak to that, was about finding a trade route through the north. Right. And there were big conflicts between the U.S. and Canada in the 70s about Canada's inland waterways being international waters or not, more to be able to, for American oil tankers to crisscross the north, but also for the potential, as the ice is melting, as we're decrying, which is a problem, that releases the possibility of extracting resources, right? And so it's a gold mine, literally.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, all kinds of resources.
Diamond, oil, natural gas.
Right.
Yeah. So it's definitely an issue, and like again, it's like, and thanks again to you, Jonny. Like I knew I had to go. I needed a little extra convincing, a little extra confidence, which I appreciate. But as a Canadian, to go to the North Pole, I felt it was important for me to go because I think that it's important for Canada to establish our presence. Mm-hmm.
Did you guys put down any flags at the North?
I planted a flag on the North Pole. I mean, it's a photo op really, but it made me proud in the moment to be able to say,
"Is it still there?"
No, we didn't leave anything.
I was going to catch him.
No.
Let me another personal question. What's Greenland like? Because I had an opportunity to go to Greenland and then just kind of
not
fell
green.
apart.
That's the joke.
Well, yeah. But is it? I heard it's just like the end of the earth.
Yeah,
it's just like wild.
So it's mostly a massive glacier in the middle, right? We haven't finished crossing it, and the next thing we have to do is to finish the route is to cross the south across Greenland, and we're waiting on a parks permit to get across that. We had
from Denmark.
From Denmark, yeah. But actually, there's a politicization between Denmark and Greenland, which is a protectorate.
Yes.
So that became a live issue for us. But it is beautiful. It is. I mean, the north coast of Greenland is incredible mountains and cliffs on the coast. It's very cold.
Yeah.
And it's very, very sparsely populated. And there's interesting like historical whaling stations and things.
Right.
But it's incredible. It's beautiful.
Wow.
Okay.
That's very, very cool.
Yeah.
And I was going to say though, only -40, which I've experienced. I was in a weird cold snap in Calgary one time,
Right.
And then I was in Arjeplog where it was like -40 or -45. I've heard like in Antarctica it gets like -80, like it's much colder. Why was it so relatively warm? And again, -40 is horrid.
Yeah. Well, it almost becomes a bit academic. Like at -40 to -60, it's
What's
like
the difference?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the viscosity of fluids gets really messy out
But I mean,
there.
like the difference between -25 and -40 is a big difference.
Yeah.
I mean, -40 is like this sucks.
Well, and it's the wind. Like we had -35, 38 with no wind. It's fine.
Yeah.
But -40 with a 20-mile-an-hour wind, like it's punishing.
Yeah.
And the difference
I had that in
is-
Calgary. That's horrid.
There you go. But the difference in Calgary is like you can go to a cafe. But with us, it's like you're
Slept in a bar. Yeah.
Yeah, right. You're either like out on the tundra chipping because we had to chip ice. We can't stop.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
So you're outside. Fortunately, you're doing physical activity.
But
we have
still.
super high tech clothes and stuff. But it's hard.
Yeah, but I mean, your nose and like your eyeballs.
That's
like,
I got some pre-frostbite and stuff. You wear a balaclava. You have to be super careful. And if it's windy, you wear goggles.
Right.
You got to manage it. But it's like anything. Once you build up your expectation of what it's going to feel like as soon as you step outside, you're ready.
Right. But the Antarctica has a possibility of being colder.
No, so in Antarctica, and I'll talk about seasonality and sun in a second. But in Antarctica, it only gets to -80 in the so-called winter, which is our summer. People only go there unless you're overwintering, which is extremely specialized. But people really only go there to do any exploration in the summer, in the Christmas months, and then it varies, but it's more civilized, -30.
Okay.
When it's our vehicles that overwinter there get to -80 in storage. People who are at a science station who stay overwinter and remove their own appendixes, appendices, see -80.
Is that McMurdo? Is that down
Yeah,
there?
McMurdo's one of the stations. down
Yes.
there. Yeah.
Are you going to watch The Thing?
Yeah, no, I haven't, but I will.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
Oh, it's huge in Antarctica.
Oh, really?
I wrote a review of The Thing one time, and like the South Pole contacted me to tell me that they love my review.
That's
and I
awesome.
got the movie. And,
That's awesome. I haven't. I neither have I watched. What's the Arctic crime thing out right now? Anyway.
True Detective.
True Detective. I haven't
season
watched
4.
it. Yeah, I haven't watched it.
Ooh,
I will.
good.
I will.
Very good. Very good.
However, one thing that I forgot to mention
You haven't
earlier
seen
is
you got to see The Thing.
okay. I will.
Classic.
I promise.
Yeah.
From about I forget which day exactly, but we had about 2 months of polar day, so the sun never went down.
Yeah, wild.
And the point of this, we had to get there as soon as the light came up because we can't really navigate in the dark. It's very hard to see the ice in the dark, right?
Sure.
And the thickness and all that. So, but the difference between when it's constantly dark and it's constantly light is a very short amount of time. It's measured in weeks, right? And so we got up there and we were kind of waiting for the light to come, and then the light came, and then shortly afterwards it never got dark, and that is interesting too because it messes with your rhythms a bit.
I was gonna say, what does that do to you? You like just like emotionally, it sounds like devastating.
Well, we were keeping to a normal sleep schedule and watching our watches to sort of monitor our own fatigue and so on. But then by the end, because the ice was actually melting as we came down to Greenland, we were starting to run. And it was not, honestly, the run from the North Pole to Greenland was very hard.
Yeah, that seemed to be the hardest part, right?
And we knew it was going to be hard because so the whole polar ice cap rotates. Against the rotation of the Earth.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Huh. The land fast ice, which is connected to Greenland, is stuck to Greenland. So there's a gap where it's grinding against each other all the time, and it can move apart, move together, rub against each other, right? And we'd seen lots of these so-called open leads of open water throughout our trip, right? Had to cross them. But that particular crossing, we always knew it would be tough and very rough because it's been bashing up against itself for months, right? And you get the chunks of old ice, pack ice, that's been washed down and frozen up against the shore. So suddenly you have this like moonscape of like mountainous disasters from previous years.
Icebergs like flowing at you.
Yeah. And we saw icebergs. It's like, it's crazy. Like the terrain, it's almost incomprehensible. It's like, I talked to off-road people and they're like, oh yeah, it was like, it's like the worst off-roading thing you can possibly imagine. Anyway, getting to Greenland, we always knew there'd be a gap, and we got there and we fought for a couple of weeks to get closer and closer. And then there's just we could see it in the satellite imagery, there's a huge ice cap. And we worked with the European Space Agency. They provided special images to us. They shot special images every day. It's incredible. Thanks to that astronaut. Yeah, so we were getting from Starlink. We were getting things from the European Space Agency's satellite arm.
Wild.
Yeah, great connection. Amazing people.
So cool.
Yeah, and we have an image of our vehicles from satellite on the North Pole.
Oh wow, really?
It's pretty cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
frame that. That's
Yeah,
cool.
Anyway, that gap, it looked like it was going to be too wide. It was like a kilometer across. It looked like we'd never be able to make it. We were
I
starting
was
to
gonna say,
despair.
what is the max width? Like, what's the most you could do aquatically?
How long is a climbing rope, really? It's like, we
got
could
it.
have maybe
Okay.
put more ropes together, but we'd get some more 100 yards. Kilometer is
Too much.
Plus, the water's moving. The current in the water,
Yeah,
the ice is moving. That's why I started talking about those ice ladders. We'd sometimes put down those ice ladders across a gap, and they'd start to twist because the two plates are moving against each other.
So they're moving that quickly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I crossed one with my car, I remember, and I got out to help the next guy, and already my track was split by about like a meter and a half. Like
Wow.
and in a couple of places, you watch the videos, we're actually driving from moving ice floe to moving ice floe in like a Tetris puzzle type.
Yeah, I saw that. It's I mean it seemed crazy that you got to the pole relatively quickly, and you never. I was like, when are they getting to Greenland? Like, because you look on a map, it's not far, but it took for like.
Yeah.
There were some days where you didn't go. You went like a kilometer, right? I mean,
Yeah, I think our shortest day was 8 kilometers or something.
8 kilometers,
Yeah.
which is 5 miles.
Yeah,
Which is crazy in a
but
day.
think of
You
it like
could
that.
walk that.
That's 12 guys working all day.
No, I know.
To go, 5 kilometers.
that's
or
Okay,
5 miles.
so that's a
Wow.
great. That was the question I was trying to get to. 4 Yemelyas, 3 people each, 12 people.
Mm-hmm.
This sounds awesome and also incredibly expensive. Who's footing the bill? Who's footing the bill for this?
Yeah.
Or are you also the chief?
He's a stunt guy for Fast and
the
Furious.
fundraiser in
He got the
chief? Is this
cash.
coming out of your pocket?
my own law career. It's like, yeah.
No, I'm serious. Like, how did
Tires.
you?
Yeah, tires.
You guys are-
Tire sales.
You
Buy
guys,
tires.
you guys are sponsored.
Yeah, we are sponsored. There's a Swiss nonprofit called goodgear.org, which you
Okay.
can look up also,
Yep.
whose project is to do good science projects around the world, and
kidding.
they're well funded. One of the guys on our expedition is one of the funders of that, so
right.
it comes around.
Are you at liberty to disclose how much something of this costs?
No, because I don't know. It's like I remember Tanner Faz saying, with sushi and race car, I never look at the bill. I don't look at the whole bill on this, but I know what the individual airdrops cost, and they were all 6-figure problems.
How much for a Yemelya if you had to buy one?
They're priceless. There's no price on them. I mean, they're hand built.
Okay,
Is
we're
there-
in
is
the
there-
rapid
is-
fire.
Is there a demand for Yemelyas now?
There is now.
Well, yeah, interesting.
Because of this podcast.
Well, we're thinking of, because we don't think a North Pole expedition can maybe logistically be done again, or not for a long time, or maybe ever. We're thinking actually of, and we've started talking to scientific outfits, especially in Greenland, because they could be used on the Greenland ice cap really well to pull scientific projects around. But also Arctic Trucks does that business. So we're kind of, it turns out. So I was doing an interview with CBC in Canada, the Canadian Broadcasting National System, and they were like, well, so how experienced is your crew? And I was like, oh, we have a lot of the world's experts, and I looked around like we have every one of the world's experts at driving on the poles right here, right now, right?
Right.
So like if you want to go to a pole, like Emil Grimson from Arctic Trucks, Vasily Elagin, like everybody who drives on a pole is in this team. So so the vehicles can be used by anybody who needs northern transport, and so that's why Arctic Trucks have been popular in northern Canada and Alaska, road building indigenous peoples, and then the Yemelyas, because they happen to end up in Greenland, we may end up helping scientific outfits in Greenland.
Okay, lightning round because we're running out of time.
Sure.
We got like 5 minutes left. What watch did you wear out there?
That's great because I'm a watch nerd. Yeah.
Yes.
So I was.
This is literally what the stupid Rolex commercials are about.
I know,
Right?
I know.
So what
Yeah.
did you? I bet it's a Casio.
It's
solar powered.
It's no. It's I'm a very partial. I'm a Longines fan and I'm an Omega fan, and my go-to watch for my whole life racing has been a Speedmaster. So I wore my Speedmaster for sentimental reasons.
So you wound it every day?
100%.
What?
It's an expedition,
Okay,
man. You got to work
all right,
hard.
All right. Best bit of like technical outerwear.
Wow. I have a parka, a technical parka from an outfit called Red Fox, which is a European outfitter.
Okay.
We had lots of Mammut stuff also. We're sponsored. But my Omilgoktok family in Cambridge Bay sewed on a fox hood and a beaver. I don't know what you call it. It's
Ascot.
yeah, it's like an ascot. It's sewn into the collar of the
liner,
jacket.
yeah.
Like a liner, and you put the beaver fur across your face,
Nice.
and then between. It's incredible. Like I'm as loving as animals as you can be, but
Except for coyotes.
a fur brim on your hood changes the wind on your face. So that parka with those indigenous upgrades is insanity.
Worst piece of gear. What failed you?
It's hard to find good boots. I ended up with 2 boots. I have said Baffin is a big manufacturer of like super heavy northern boots, and I use those for most of the ice picking and stuff. But Vasily Elagin, the Russian kind of genius, mad genius, brought me a set of country person's boots from rural Russia, which are like Melton felt on the outside and like very cheap rubber underneath.
Yeah.
But I would wear those. You wear those outside and inside. But we ended up calling one of the guys did speak in English. Said, "Oh, you put on Michael Schumacher boots. They're my racing boots for driving with."
Right.
Anyway, your question was worst, which is the boot problem was always a problem because you had to dry them out and always chase that. There's not a single solution for boots.
Interesting.
What's the craziest field repair on the vehicles you had to do? Because I watched like all kinds of weird stuff happening.
Yeah. So I'm a reasonably good welder, but there are guys on this team who we broke a couple of the suspension arms, right? And we have some spares, but we didn't have a spare for that one, or it wasn't quite.
You
the
got to
length.
do a lot of disassembly.
Yeah.
You could weld it on the truck. Right?
So by connecting the 12-volt systems in parallel into 24-volt systems with a wire welder, and I'm not kidding, like upside down in a blizzard, this guy with a rod arc welder welding together suspension arms. He welded together a ball joint. So artfully that it still held the Heim joint, the rose joint in it. I'm like, I've restored a bunch of old cars, as you know, and stuff that guy welding.
Wow.
Beautiful. Incredible.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. Okay.
What was the tire thing with the flaming
Yeah. So we had to
mounting?
Yeah.
Flaming mounting.
So as you know, I've got a tire company, and I've got guys
yeah.
that go around LA in mobile trucks mounting tires, and so we talk all day about mounting tires and how to techniques for mounting tires. The legendary technique that off-roaders know is to put brake clean in and light it to pop it on the bead. Right? It's dangerous. It's stupid. You've seen probably things on videos where people get killed, and it goes horrifically wrong.
Yeah.
However, sometimes you have to do it.
Right.
And so we had with the Arctic trucks, we had to mount a 44, and they don't take the bead very well.
51. Oh,
no,
it was an Arctic
a
truck.
44. 44 inch tire, a Nikian tire. And so, but when the temperature's so low and the wind's so high, it's hard to make it all work out. But yeah, that one, I think we did a good video of it. That worked brilliantly. The dumbest, well, not dumbest, but when you, so these tires, the problem with these really balloon tires on the 51 inch tires is that they, when you're running them at very low pressures, if you do hit a sharp ice edge or something, you can tear the sidewall. And so we damaged a couple of those, which is why we had a couple pushed out of planes. But we tried to repair them to not use up the new ones. So I actually did again, and I repaired a lot of tires for Zip Tire. You have to warm them up enough. So you take a 51-inch tire into your living space, which you have to deflate it, take it inside the Yemelya, which is very heavy, very difficult to get in. And then suddenly it's like you have this incredible like big object in the middle of where you're living.
Right.
Let it warm up, inflate it a little bit, and then try to patch it either from the inside or from the outside. I did a patch on the not even a patch. I did a fluid repair on the outside tear of one of these tires to help it hold air, and it actually worked for a while, which is, I mean, anybody who knows vulcanizing fluid and stuff, I basically vulcanized the outside of the tire, trying to melt it together again, and it worked for a while.
Wow.
We don't repair sidewalls with Zip Tire. You shouldn't repair sidewalls.
But if you're running 1.5 to 2
Right,
PSI.
exactly.
28 miles an hour max.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And so basically I glued it together.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, and this is probably the last question.
Yeah,
Last question for me.
No, go ahead.
And holy moly, we could have done twice as long. But so, what was the sketchiest thing? Is there in particular? You talked about the crossings, but is there any
Sounds like
particular
getting to
moment,
Greenland.
any single moment where you're like, "This is it, man"?
Yeah, it's.
Oh, sorry, this might be take you to a dark place.
No. It's. I'm just trying to think because every incredibly hard thing is incredibly hard until you do it, and then it becomes pedestrian. Like the first time that we did one of the ladder crossings as a team, we're like it was all exciting, and we're videotaping everything or shooting everything, and
Instagram.
and then we did it like it was incredible flexing. And by the 1000th time you've done it, you're like, throw down the ladders, let's go, right? Okay. The first water crossing when I first drove one into the water, it's like, wow, right, yeah. But the thing is, it was so busy, and we're doing so many things. In some ways, you didn't have time to process it. Looking back, I think that our sketchiest moments were actually in possible logistical fall aparts. If we hadn't been able to get that fuel to the North Pole from the Barneo station, it would have been game over.
Right.
And so you
need to leave the trucks and just airlift out kind of thing.
Honestly, we had search and rescue available. It would have been hard to get us out. I haven't told anybody that. Like it would have been a very difficult experience.
Yeah, how would you do it? Yeah. You just sit there and run out of fish.
Once the runway broke at Barneo, it would be a very difficult staging up of a helicopter.
Right.
And we had all that ready, and we had the resources to do it.
Right.
But it was like I don't think we knew what it would be like. We didn't really stop to think
Could
about
they
it.
have sent in like an ice-breaking ship or something? Or forget
No,
about
too
that?
early in the season.
What about
early.
like that James Bond, like they pass with a C-130 and you got a hook on your back?
Yeah.
And
yeah. No, I mean the truth is like
CIA
extraction, exfiltration.
No,
Yeah,
but there's rendition.
yeah. No, the great thing is we had again all the world's polar experts. So we had a Danish guy out of Greenland who does all the expeditions, these guys talk in the funniest terms of like, oh yeah, well maybe a twin otter can go so far, and then maybe we have to switch to maybe we have to fly a helicopter in the body of a plane and then take the helicopter out of the plane. Like,
Right.
it can get done.
So-
Anything can happen.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a matter of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so honestly, I think that our risks were not that great, but when I stand back and look at it, I think, oh my gosh, that was really dumb.
Right.
Would you do it again? Last question.
Yeah, 100%. I spent a lifetime doing hard things with cars.
Yeah.
That's just my jam. That I grew up on a farm, seeing if I could do this with a dune buggy or whatever. And I've been lucky that my whole life's been a natural extent of that. And the reason that I wanted to do a pole-to-pole expedition starting more than a decade ago was because it's the hardest thing that I can do with cars.
Yeah.
And I still love movie stunts. I still love racing. I have Pikes Peak, Baja 1000. I still done all that. But in terms of something really, really hard to do with a wheeled vehicle, it's a culmination. And if you said, hey, we're going back, I'd be like, yeah, of course I'm going to go.
Cool. Well, on that note,
ACP, let's give them a shout out.
Yeah.
The sites, let me see if I have them correct. So it's transglobalcar.com.
Correct.
Okay. And then the main sponsor, you want to give them a shout out. That's Good Gear.
Yeah, goodgear.org.
Okay. And then ACP and the number 20. So ACP Racing 20.
That's the Insta.
That's the Instagram, but you can also look them up on Andrew Comrie-Picard on Facebook
Yeah,
to see
that's
some
the
other
best.
content.
IMDb to see his stunt work.
Yeah.
And then the
Be my
company,
agent.
if you need your tires changed, is Zip Tire.
Hey.
Yeah, that's right. We got vans that bounce around LA, put them on your car in the driveway, place of work, wherever you need tires. And we're big tire nerds. And EV tires. I want to talk to you about EV tires.
Oh yeah, he had a whole spiel prepared on EV tires.
Oh, boy.
I
All right,
do.
well, we'll have to have him back.
Have come
and,
back.
and I got to tell you, someday I got to tell you my Jamie Lee Curtis Tesla story.
Yeah, you do.
Oh, jeez.
It's a really good story. It's a really good. It goes to 11.
We'll have you back. We'll have you back. We'll have you back.
Awesome.
Yeah.
ACP, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys.
The InEVitable Vodcast, brought to you by the all-electric Nissan Ariya. Inspired by the future, designed for the now.